Hello and welcome to week 6. And this week we're going to talk about the 5E lesson plan. So first, here is our agenda for today. So first we're going to look at the components of a 5E lesson. Then we're going to compare 5E versus 6E and the different styles. And then I'm going to give you a sample lesson, and that'll be second grade. All right, so let's jump right into 5E lesson. So again, as we've talked about all throughout this session, science takes a different approach of teaching, and it's much more hands-on, inquiry-based, conceptual thinking, So the first step of a 5E is just to engage, which is very similar to your hook of a traditional lesson, but engaging them, piquing their interest, just really trying to engage them. Then they're going to explore. So they are going to actively investigate the topic through inquiry. So this could be as simple as categorizing things, or it could be a full-on lab. Then goes into explain. Explain is where you're going to share your thoughts, meaning the students will share their thoughts, and then you as the teacher will give them some more knowledge or some resources to help their exploration. So then you will go into elaborate. So that's building off of what they've done for explore, because you don't want totally different things so they can't correlate. You want to elaborate on what they did for explore. So after they get some more knowledge during the explain, then they will extend their understanding of the concept with elaborate. So they might further investigate or change what they've done previously in their explore. Maybe their thinking wasn't exactly on track, but this is where you're not going to say, oh, you did this wrong. This is where you're going to give them probing questions to kind of guide them. Then you're going to evaluate and assess the student's understanding of the concepts. So this could be informal or formal. So let's go a little bit more in depth. So engage could be open-ended questions of just asking questions that encourage students to think about the topic and share their ideas. So activating that prior knowledge. You could do a little demonstration. That could be you doing it as the teacher, or that could be watching a little video. You can also look at images, like this one right here. You could ask, what are some observations you see? What type of habitat might this be? Why does this guy have on all this equipment? Kind of ask those questions so that they are starting to think along those lines of the topic that you're going to be discussing. Then start brainstorming. Encourage students to share their initial thoughts or ideas. So saying, what do you think about when I use the word recycle? And they have to give their explanation. It's just engaging them to really try and activate that prior knowledge. Again, real-time polls or connecting to a personal experience. I always like to use stuff that I'm interested in. It makes them see me more as a person, not just this teacher standing up there. So that's engage. Then we are looking at explore. This is where you're going to do an investigation, observations, building, collecting data. This is usually collaborative. So as you can see in this picture, this was taken in my 5th grade classroom. We were talking about decomposers. And you can see in her hands, she has just a worm. I went to the store and bought worms. And so they were doing an investigation on decomposers. But this gives them a way to explore decomposers right there. Then explain. Next is this is probably the most important part of your lesson, which is where the students are actually going to explain their findings. Okay, and this is more of a step-by-step one. So first you're going to have students explain what they found during their explore. Then you're going to have teacher guidance. So you're going to facilitate those discussions of what did you see? Oh, when this happened, what did this occur? This is where you're going to ask those probing questions. Then you're going to introduce some of that formal vocabulary, academic concepts, really start looking at what they are learning. Then the students will start to work back in groups to get that deeper understanding, and that's where you go more into the elaborate or extend, which we'll talk about in a second. And you're formalizing that knowledge. You're making sure that they understand that vocabulary. So this is a concept map of just conduction, convection, and radiation. So I would give this to them, and if they were doing an investigation on radiation, maybe I would ask them, why is this radiation? Or first I would probably ask, which type of heat transfer is this? And then we go into elaborate and extend. So you're just building off. I know that these activities don't exactly build on each other. They're kind of all over the place, but I will give you an example. So elaborate or extend, it just depends on which model you're doing. It's basically the same thing. That's where you're going to build off of the exploration. So in this, the students, we had already done the decomposer, but now they were actually putting them in the habitat and making sure that they understood what did that decomposer thrive on. So they're further understanding what they've already studied with decomposers. So this could be a project, real world application, further research. It's normally collaborative and a hands-on activity, as you can see from this picture. And yes, this was taken from my 5th grade classroom. Evaluate is usually an informal or a formal assessment. More often it's informal. And I usually just had this as putting in their notes in their notebook. And we've talked about the scientific notebook that I use with my students earlier. But again, this doesn't go right with the 5E lesson. But this is just an example of notes that they would have to copy down at the end of the lesson. So I made sure that they had the resource after we had already explored. Next, we're going to look at the difference between 5E and 6E. So you might see in your textbook that they say 6E. Trying to make it easier. Your textbook uses another component of e-learning, which, let's be honest, technology is great, but it doesn't always work. So you can't have an e-learning activity for every single lesson. Other resources I found is more of an engineering component, which is building. Well, every single lesson can't have a building or engineering component of it. So for the sake of this class and how I ran my 5th grade classroom and 4th grade classroom, was just use the 5E model. And that's what you'll be using for your assignment as well. But I did want to touch on that because your textbook did go over a 6E. Now a real world lesson plan for 5E. For this would be a 2nd grade habitat lesson. So first, just to engage them, I would ask them what's their favorite animal. Ooh. And what habitat do you think it lives in? So just having them kind of discuss, think about their favorite animal, what components, and just have a round robin discussion. Then in pairs, I would have up a few animals and they had to choose from the list, because that would probably go with the standard. They would have to discuss what habitat and what characteristics they would need. So a fish or very broad animals, not super specific. Then watch a video showing various habitats. A great one, there's one on YouTube that has all these Disney habitats and you have to identify them. I used it in 5th grade, but second graders could also do it. And that's where you start pulling in that key vocabulary of what does a habitat mean? What are some of the components of it? Then elaborate. Students would add to their graphic organizer. Maybe they would draw this habitat with their chosen animal, and then evaluate. I would have them present, or have them truly make a model of this. And yes, that usually goes in elaborate, but it just depends on your time frame and how much time you have allotted for this habitat lesson. So overall, 5E is very similar to the traditional way. You just do not give all the information right at the very beginning. You let them explore and build on that schema that they already have. So if you have any questions this week, please let me know. I'm here as a resource, but I hope you have a great week. Thank you.